Why is recorded in front of a live studio audience.
In many ways, like, look, Jon Stewart got a Peabody. What says we don't? Peabody,
Right.
right? Is that how you're supposed to say it?
Doesn't matter.
Because there's the
Did I
town
tell
in
you my
Massachusetts.
Peabody? Did I tell you my story about that?
No.
This is like a weird
Does it
Connie
have to
thing.
also do with Peabody and the town of Athol, which is my favorite town in
No,
Massachusetts?
but that's an amazing town in
Yeah.
Massachusetts. I wonder if my grandma knows that one too.
There's a
My
there's a
grandma
joke.
was from there.
There's a joke about one governor of Massachusetts who had three towns named after him: Peabody,
Okay.
Marblehead, and Athol.
That's
But
pretty
anyway,
awesome.
you were
That's
saying.
hilarious. So my grandma's from Peabody
Mm,
and she's definitely Massachusetts in her heart, even though she moved to Michigan when she was little.
Masshole.
Yeah. And so we've all been saying, like, since kind of New Year's, like several of us in the family just feel like she's been haunting, not in a bad way, not in a, even in a creepy way, but
Right.
just like just little signs or things that just make you feel like, if you believe in that stuff, like, Graham.
Right.
So I was walking through this CVS in West Bloomfield, Michigan.
Where all
So
good
right here.
apparitions appear.
Right. And I was getting ready to go. I think it was like our Frankenmuth trip with the kids, like with that side of the family.
Right. Did you have
And
your extra care card out, or do you give them your phone
no, I
number?
just I just give my phone number, which is my phone
Okay.
number from 30 years ago, but that's fine. And if they ever reassign it, someone's getting all of my coupons. But
Oh, and that's a
they
lot of coupons.
I know. But they have that little stand where they put like the local high school
Hmm.
flag, right? So like West Bloomfield Lakers, blah, blah, blah. Well, there was all these like baseball hats, like a bunch of them, not one, like a bunch of them that just said Peabody, Massachusetts on it,
Huh.
which was so weird. So I called
Yeah.
my aunt and my uncle and I was like, Grammy's haunting me at the CVS. Weird place to choose, but
I can't understand why Andrea would want that hat, even if you were at that moment you were wearing it in Peabody.
right. But
That's
the
a
other thing I could think
weird.
of is maybe it was to go with their local, maybe the printer just sent it to the, I don't know, but I don't know. If my grandma was alive, I would have bought the hat for her, but she's probably the only person on the planet and she wouldn't have worn
Yeah,
it
but
anyways. It would have
would she have
screwed up
worn? I
her
was gonna
hair.
say that was my follow up. Yeah, would she actually put it on?
Um,
Because yeah,
mhm.
no, it's like when at one of my cousin's weddings that I was not at, but everyone was doing cake stands because it was that kind of wedding.
Of
And one of
course.
my cousins turned to my grandmother and said, "Grandma, if you want, I'll." And she was like, "Andy, I can't do that. I'm wearing a dress." And we're like, "Thank you, Grand
Exactly.
Gram." No, we,
That's
um,
exactly why. It's not for any other reason.
exactly.
This is Why, with your hosts, Heidi Hedquist and Luke Poling.
I feel like we need to say something about Tammy. Do we say something about Tammy and give her a little bit of an introduction and say, hey,
We can, 'cause she's awesome.
well, she is, yes, but I would feel that way about all of our guests. That's sort of a prerequisite.
Hmm.
Well, for most of them, there's two or three, and you can pick which ones are those.
I think we have the same ones.
Oh, I have zero doubt in my mind we have the same ones.
Yeah.
Um, but Tammy, a musician, uh, not even
Producer,
singer songwriter,
executive,
yeah, and has a new
playwright.
musical that is a well, we get into the origin of the
Yeah.
musical, so we'll just I guess that's enough, right? And then just up and away
Yeah.
to
And if you're
Neverland.
not a musical theater fan, don't wig out and think it's going to be
Right.
that kind of musical.
What does that mean? That kind of musical.
I don't know. I mean, I'm a musical fan, so I love every kind of musical, but I don't know. Some people might go, we're, first of all, this isn't the music show. Why are you telling
Right.
us all this? Why aren't
Right.
you just being idiots? And then, secondly, some people just might, her story is really good. And the story
Yes.
of how this came to be is really good. And she's
Yes.
incredibly engaging. And when you Google her before or after you listen, you will find all sorts of incredible things she's done in various capacities throughout her career.
Yes. And we're meeting her for coffee at the Earth Cafe on La
Yes, we are.
Cienega. And yeah,
Yes, we are. That is happening because she's great.
yes. my darling, how did this come about? When did this start?
It started as a pandemic project. I have never had time. I've always worked in other people's projects, and I've gone back and forth for a long time between television production and music. And in 2011, I've been the drummer for Sparks.
Oh, we'll get there.
Mail.
We will be.
Oh, don't
we're
you
gonna
worry.
spend some time talking about the mail.
Okay. Well, we did a project called The Seduction of Ingmar Bergman, and it was a live stage show that we did at the Ford Theater. And that project was highly, highly satisfying to be in town and create a stage production that we could do in our hometown. Stood out to me because, when you're on the road, it's very fun to play shows, but it's hard. It's hard to travel. And a lot of people think or assume that you're getting to spend time in the places that you visit, but that's not always the case. And so I sort of reverse engineered a way to promote the solo music that I was making by creating a show. And I felt like if I could create that, because some of the best experiences that I had were when we went to a place and did a thing like music festivals. There's a festival in Spain that we did a few times where we would switch cities. And in one weekend, we would be in Madrid. And then in the next weekend, we would be in Barcelona. And I thought, gosh, if I could have a show that utilized music and we went to a place and we did that show in that place as part of fringe festivals, that seems like it would be the equivalent of a music festival. And I have to tell you guys, it exceeds all expectation that I had about it. We picked places that we wanted to go, and we just reverse engineered the experience that we wanted to have. And it's just been a joy. It's been so, so fun. And the reception of it, the stuff that I didn't expect was that because we based the show around Peter Pan, I didn't understand that there's a whole group of people out there who are Peter Pan fanatics. So, we do get to hear from people after they see the show, kind of what attracted them to it in the first place. And sometimes it's the original music and they like musicals and they just see everything that comes to their town because it's musical. Mm-hmm. And then there's some people that see the artwork, and as they're choosing what to do that weekend, they sort of see the artwork of Wendy and they're like, oh, what is that? And then they go and investigate it. But there's a whole third group of people that anytime something tangentially related to Peter Pan hits their world, they explore that. And so we're getting all the trifecta of all of those people coming out to the show.
What do you think it is about the Peter Pan story? I love Peter Pan. Like I'm not to that level, but it is one of my favorite stories of all time. What is it about it?
Why does it resonate with you? Why is it one of your favorite stories of all time?
Well, it started when I was little. It started with the Disney version. I was very torn on whether I wanted to be Wendy, Tiger Lily, or Tinkerbell, and depending on the day, I would switch. I grew up to definitely be probably Tinkerbell, but okay, yes, I did. But then I had the opportunity to read the play as a kid, and I lived in London for a little while. I went to J.M. Barrie's house. So there's all these different things, but then the story itself, I think there's something so magical of being able to not necessarily grow up, but still understand you need to grow up. Like that balance that walks through there, I think has always, I don't know. So that's what's resonated with me.
And pirates.
And so I love pirates.
Ticks all the boxes.
And I've often collected Lost Boys. So, so actually pretty much everything spoke to me on all levels.
Well, the actress who plays Wendy wrote the book for this, and it was a story that resonated with her. It was her favorite fairy tale. I am 180 degrees from Peter Pan. I sort of came into the world a 65-year-old grandma. I've always been like really grounded and didn't really relate to the story of Peter Pan because, and this is something that we explored in our story. And we're of two different generations. The actress who wrote the book and stars in it is a lot younger than I am. And she completely relates to Peter Pan. It was her favorite fairy tale. And she's an actress and involved in art. And she's 100% heart and not head. And she's a different generation. So for me, I'm almost 100%, even though I work in art, I am an executor of things, and I just kind of roll up my sleeves no matter what I'm doing and kind of get into the details of it. But because I grew up in a different time, I love that people have a magical childhood, but in my mind, Disney hijacked this idea of childhood. Because when I was growing up, adults had all the fun. Adults were drinking and going to parties. And when you were an adult, you have money and you have freedom and you are an agent of your own happiness. And so as she was exploring what she wanted to write about, because the album had themes that were driven by the songs, and we decided, wow, this is a really interesting world, and we see it very, very differently. And I feel like everybody is getting it wrong in the present moment, and that, you know, they're sort of looking back with nostalgia and whimsy. And it's great if you have parents who make your childhood magical, that's a wonderful thing. But if you don't, all is not lost, because when you grow up, you can create whatever kind of life you want to have, and you can't do that when you're 11. So to me, it just seems like the world kind of got tilted, and we wrote this story about a woman who ends up, through her daughter and through the story of Peter Pan, after she's outed to the world as Wendy from, you know, she's Wendy Darling from Peter Pan, she realizes when her daughter's heart gets broken that she's in charge of her happiness, in much the same way that she's trying to teach her daughter, you know, you don't have to depend on a boy or a phone call or other people to find happiness. And ironically, whenever you're doing a artistic project with other people, we found that, right? Because making anything can be super, super hard. And we have this group of really strong-willed, competent women who are all representing a different path. We all have very, very different lives. We're different ages. We do different jobs. But we have, you know, I did all the music and produced this. We have a female director named Krisha Plonka. April Wish is our actress, and she wrote the script, the book for the story. And then we have a visual artist named Masa Zargaran. And each one of us has a different family situation. Some of us are moms, some of us aren't. And we're at different phases in our life. But this artistic experience, even though it's been hard, has been unbelievably satisfying, in the same way that Wendy Darling realizes, like, okay, my life has been hard, and all of these things didn't necessarily work out the way I thought they were going to, but it's a whole beautiful, magical human experience that I'm having. And that's the really fun part of the story and the experience.
Well, I love it too, because even your two stories, obviously not knowing the stories of the other two, but your two stories to me sort of parallel with the message, the overall message of Peter Pan, right? That it's, you almost need a little bit of both, right? For that ultimate magical life. Like, you need to still hold that there is a possibility of magic, but being responsible is not necessarily being boring, because you do have control of your all the things you already said, but you sort of, as individuals, are embodying what I think the message of the story was originally.
100%. Yeah. And I didn't know when we embarked on this that the original novel that J.M. Barrie wrote was actually, you know, Wendy was in the title. It was Peter Pan
Yeah.
and Wendy.
Yep.
And the book starts with her. It's her story, and very much a story of her and her mom. And she sort of bookends it. But Disney completely changed that when they did the animated version. And I just wasn't familiar with that. So, I mean, there's no bigger metaphor for what we're trying to say as women, and just being present in the world and owning our agency. And right, we've had a whole conversation post Me Too about being heard and being seen. And ironically, you know, again, I'm older than my collaborators, and this is another ironic epiphany that I had, as you know, similar to, oh, childhood is magical and somehow being an adult is a drag. I certainly have not had that experience. I think the older I get, the more I know myself, the more satisfying life is, the more freedom I have. But ironically, the same message that the world tells women about getting older, that it's scary and that you become invisible and that you lose your agency, I have not found that to be the case, because of course, just like anything else, we're becoming more interesting people, and we have references to draw upon, and we're finding out what our passions are. And I think that the scary part might be if you value what being represents means, like if your only value is sort of being young and hot, well, then it's scary to get older, because you're not always going to be young and hot. But if that's not what you invested in, then you're fine, right? Because all the things that you invested in, you know, all the things you like to do, you're only becoming more competent in those areas. So I feel like I'm also just carrying this flag for women of a certain age to say, well, it doesn't have to be scary. It's actually really interesting, because you are, you're embracing more and more of what you like to do, and becoming freer, hopefully freer in your life to voice those opinions and lean into all that stuff, maybe a little bit more than you did when you were in your 20s and 30s, and maybe the world was telling you to be a little quieter and stay in your lane. I think you get braver as you get older.
Well, and don't you think focusing on the things you focus on ultimately, and not worrying so much about being young and hot, ultimately makes you stay gorgeous forever, which you are, but you know, but like your inner beauty like exudes to your exterior beauty. So if you focus on happiness and your age and doing what you love, and the wisdom and everything we gain as we get older, and the confidence, it comes out of our pores so that we look great exterior wise.
I agree completely. You know,
so
you sort of radiate. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
And you're radiating joy in a way that when you're younger and less confident, it's pretty hard to do.
Yes, agreed.
The
that's awesome.
lineup, as you were talking about, sort of the key roles in the making of this production being women of different ages and different backgrounds, was that something you intended to do, or was it just an incredibly happy accident where one day you looked around and said, oh wow, look at the kind of diverse storylines we have here?
No, it was intentional. I have mostly worked, especially in music, I've mostly worked with dudes. And that is because I have been hired in other people's projects. And so when I was putting my own project together, it was very intentional for me to find women to collaborate with. And I was also starting to produce. You know, I played everything on the record. And I had started playing bass before the pandemic, but I didn't have a home studio. And I only played guitar well enough to compose. I'm not a great guitar player, but I didn't even think I would be able to make an album playing all the instruments myself when I started this. I was writing the songs and then thinking about who I would bring with me on the adventure. And I do have some collaborators. My guitar teacher, Nick Chamian, joined me, and he plays most of the guitar solos. I recruited my son to sing on one song with me, and I hired a trumpet player. But I did all the basic tracks myself and wrote everything. And so when I was thinking about, it really was this dilemma, because I had played everything. How am I going to promote this record? Because I'm just not going to put a band together and go out on the road. That sounds like torture to me. I cannot imagine doing that. And also, I have a job that I love. I supervise physical production at a studio, and that's a dream job. But I was never going to leave that job. And when I'm in other people's projects, it's ideal because I can come in as a ringer. I have availability. I can take vacation time. I'm a real responsible person. So if somebody needs me to learn something, I'm that person who can woodshed on my own, learn all of that stuff, at my house. And then, I had a rehearsal space at my house, but I didn't have a studio that was outfitted to record. But I can learn all of that stuff at home, meet up with people, and very quickly get into a band that either has an injured player. I was a utility person for a long time, so I can come into other people's projects, and no matter what they need, if it's a 2-week run or a festival, or someone, played a lot of gigs where someone went to rehab, and I come in and I'm that person, and I can cover for them, and then they come back to the gig. But when I was looking to promote my own music, I really did look for women, because I hadn't done that before. And I'm always trying to amplify female friends. And I had worked with Masa, who's the visual artist in this project. I had worked with her as a musician, but I also knew that she was a fine artist. And so the videos that she did for this project, which we created lyric videos for each song, again, that was because I was thinking, well, I'm not going to tour with this record. So when someone like Jamie, our publicist, comes in, like, what kind of assets is she going to need to help promo this? There's going to have to be unique elements that she can talk about. And whether I'm on podcasts or, doing a show, there has to be some sort of asset and promo plan around the music, or else you're just releasing songs into the ether.
Yeah. As a songwriter, how hard was it for you to write in the different characters' voices, or is that something that you already do, a la Randy Newman or the males?
Oh, you're so sweet. I wish I could write like those people. That's very aspirational. And for me,
Well, yeah.
the first songs were inspired by a couple of things that happened at work, and they actually were written I'm glad you asked the question, because they were written in the voice of Busy Phillips. I had a really specific thing sort of happen. And when I came home and I was thinking about what inspired the songs and I sat down to write, I actually wrote 2 of the songs in her voice. And then as I started writing the album and picturing it as a show, it wasn't originally around this idea of Wendy Darling and Peter Pan. That didn't happen until April Wish came on board and she wrote the script. It was a different idea, but we used the same outline, because the initial idea I had was about a woman finding her voice who would be played by Busy Phillips. Then when April came on board, we wrote a different story. And when we had this part in it, which was for her, Wendy Darling's best friend, that's when we realized, wow, it would be so cool. Number one ask, if we could get anybody to play this role. Busy inspired some of these songs. Is there any way we could get this to her? She might not say yes, but it was inspired by her. Maybe we could ask. And she was the first person who said yes. She was the one and only person we went to. So we've had a lot of experiences like that in the process of making this, where we had an aspirational, just dream of like, who could play this, who would want to. And in the case of Busy and John Cryer, who plays Wendy Darling's agent, those two people were our only ask. We went out to each of them with our dream cast, and both of them responded to the material and said yes. And now I can't believe that we get to have them in our show. But again, that was very intentional because we knew there was no way to write a live show that they would be able to participate in every night. And so their roles are played back in voice memos, phone calls, Zoom video chats, and text. And we did that deliberately because we thought, this would be, if we can get them, they're going to give us a day. These are busy actors who, are in things all the time that are going to pay a lot more and advance their careers. This has to be a passion project for everybody. And so we needed to make it be easy and accessible and a joy. And so everyone we've asked along the way said yes, and we got our dream cast, but it was also designed so that they could come and be a part of it with us and be a celebration in it.
That's awesome. Plus it gives their role, and I don't want to say this in case you change your mind, but years down the road, they don't ever have to be recast. Like it can be them forever. They can always be those roles, which what better legacy or desire if you create a part that was inspired by you, especially to know that it's always you.
Well, one thing that, I'm not part of, this is the only time I've ever done something in theater. I consider the stuff that I do with the males, that's all music. So even though we did Seduction of Ingmar Bergman, and that was in the back of my mind as like, well, how could I create something like this? And I was involved in that, and it set the template and made me understand the mechanics of how I could do it. I don't consider myself like a theater person. And one sort of interesting, unexpected realization that I had is that when we were putting this together, I was picturing, because it's a singular role for a middle-aged actress, I was thinking to myself, wow, this could be so cool because any actress anywhere could put this on, and they really only have to talk to one person, me, right? Like they get in touch with me, and I can license all the music, and all of this video and the whole show. And it's really just April Wish and our director and I giving an actress in Kansas City or, Springfield, wherever they wanted to do it. What I didn't understand about community theater and smaller theater productions, the irony of that is that in order to attract an audience, they actually need a bigger cast.
That's true.
Because I didn't understand that. So like you need a bigger cast so that those people touch their networks to come see you. And like I found that out. I was like, oh, this is such an attractive thing. And now that I'm further into it, I realize, oh, no, it's not an advantage to have one person in your show. You actually, in a community theater, you want to tap the community so that they come out and see your production. It's kind of interesting.
It's super interesting. And I've done a lot of theater, but it didn't occur to me until you started saying it. And I'm like, you're absolutely right. But festivals and things like fringe festivals and arts festivals and things like that, the singular person is an advantage because the festivals got the draw.
That's what we found. Yeah.
That works.
The other thing too is that I really wanted to create something celebratory and fun, joyful. Music is joyful. So I wanted it to be, and also I'm sort of a light spirit. So I just wanted to come into it and make something uplifting and fun. I didn't understand, because I'm not a theater person necessarily, that a lot of solo theater pieces are pretty dark because they're about someone's journey, whether that's through cancer or grief or a breakup. A lot of people tackle pretty heavy subject matter in their solo show. And so the other thing that we found that's unexpected is how much fun the festivals are having promoting our show, because it's very unusual. The playback is pretty sophisticated. We have video elements, we have music videos that play back. I play live with an acoustic guitar, and then we have music that plays back. And so for a solo theater piece, because April is the actress in this, I think it's unusual, and theater directors find it really fresh. I also thought it was really important to make something that was about an hour. And this, again, just goes to sort of me being a light spirit and not being super familiar with theater things. I really wanted people to be able to go out, have dinner, see a show that was about something that they could talk about, and then be able to leave the theater and talk about it. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, people can get together after work, a group of women can have drinks, they can come see our show, and then go to dinner afterward and talk about these themes about empowerment and a woman finding her voice, and embracing her authenticity, which is what Wendy does in the show. So all of that was intentional, but there were consequences to it that I didn't expect because I'm not part of that world, which is really the joy in the theater directors saying, oh my gosh, this is so much fun, because we can actually schedule you guys before a heavy show or after a heavy show, and people can see both in the Fringe, because this is either setting up a certain feeling that people are going to have, or it's a palate cleanser.
You can catch preview performances of Wendy, My Darling in Los Angeles, April 13th, 27th, and May 4th. They are also setting up dates for the Orlando International Fringe Festival. You can find out when that's going to be happening, and for all other information on the show, check out their website, wendymydarlingmusical.com.
Why the Podcast is produced by the Professional Production Company. Please be sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, because we're shallow and need constant validation. For more information, you can check out our website, whythepodcast.com. And like everyone else, we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Today's show was recorded and produced by Heidi Hedquist and myself from our world headquarters, located on the second floor of the professional office building, centrally located downtown. Our reluctant executive producers are John Sauvé and Sandy Stone. Our willing producers are Rachel Allen and Randy Jeanette. Our intern is Zach Jackson. This one's for Philippe. Thanks for joining us. Flash, we're coming home.
Nigel, is that you? Are you here, Nigel?